James, CEO of XCorp, a billion-dollar company, sat in his study, his mind racing with a deadly secret. He stared at his smartphone, aware that one wrong move could cost him everything. Earlier that evening, Vanessa, his young secretary, had sent him a message claiming she was pregnant. In that moment, the stakes became clear. If his wife, Danielle, ever learned about his affair, the prenuptial agreement would force him to hand over 65% of his company. The pressure was immense, and James knew he had to act quickly. Determined to protect his empire, James had to keep Danielle in the dark and preserve the illusion of their happy marriage. On the surface, everything in his luxurious home looked perfect. Danielle, with her warm caramel-toned skin, medium-length curly hair, and expressive dark brown eyes, moved about the house with a genuine smile as she prepared dinner. She radiated contentment, unaware of the storm gathering behind the closed doors of the study. But behind James's calm facade lay a torrent of fear and ruthless ambition. In the dim light of his study, he gazed at his reflection in the dark window. The weight of his secret pressed heavily on him. He remembered Vanessa's plea earlier, a desperate request for him to arrange an abortion, which she had stubbornly refused. The idea of a child from this forbidden affair was a ticking time bomb. To save his company, James had decided that one person had to disappear. The plan was simple in his mind. Vanessa must be silenced before her defiance could spark a scandal that would shatter the delicate balance of his life. Every detail mattered now. The prenup with Danielle ensured that if the truth came out, she would not only leave him but also gain control of the company. That thought made his heart race with dread. He recalled the countless nights he had carefully maintained the appearance of a loving husband. Now, that delicate act was at risk of crumbling. The prospect of losing everything, his power, his wealth, his legacy, was unbearable. Outside the study, the house was filled with laughter and the soft murmur of Danielle's daily routine. In the dining room, Danielle chatted with a neighbor, her smile bright and genuine. James forced a smile as he joined her for a brief moment, his eyes hiding the chaos inside. He knew that to protect his empire, he must never let her suspect a thing. Every gesture, every word, had to be perfect. Returning to the solitude of his study, James composed a message on his secure phone. With trembling fingers, he confirmed the meeting with a discreet hitman he had contacted earlier. His message was cold and precise: make it vanish, no trace left. As he pressed send, his mind filled with conflicting emotions. Part of him wondered if he was going too far, if the cost of his ambition was already too high. But the thought of losing control of XCorp was a risk he could not take. In that dim, quiet room, the sounds of the evening crept in, the distant hum of traffic, the soft whispers of the wind outside. Each sound underscored the seriousness of his decision. James repeated to himself in a low, determined tone, I have to do this. For the company, for everything. The gravity of his actions made the air feel thick with tension. As the night stretched on, every minute became a battle between fear and ambition. The warmth and laughter of the living room contrasted sharply with the icy determination that now filled James's study. He thought of Danielle's gentle smile and the life they had built together, a life that he was now willing to sacrifice to protect his secret. The risk was enormous. One misstep, one slip of the tongue, and the truth would explode, leaving him with nothing. Yet, the idea of Vanessa's defiance was even more terrifying. How could he erase a person who had grown so stubborn? The thought haunted him, driving him to act quickly and without hesitation. The next morning, the house woke to a scene of serene normalcy. Danielle greeted the day with a gentle smile, preparing breakfast as if nothing were amiss. In the kitchen, sunlight streamed through sheer curtains, illuminating her warm caramel-toned skin and the hopeful gleam in her dark brown eyes. She hummed a familiar tune, unaware of the undercurrent of betrayal flowing through her home. James, ever the master of disguise, played his part to perfection. He wore a mask of loving concern as he kissed Danielle goodbye, all the while carrying the burden of his secret like a stone in his pocket. Later that day, in his sleek office, James met with a trusted aide to review his company's latest figures. The office buzzed with efficiency and the promise of success. But behind the boardroom's polished surface, James's thoughts were a tangled web. The message from Vanessa replayed in his mind, the refusal to abort the pregnancy. That single refusal now loomed as a threat that could trigger the prenup and cost him everything. Desperation set in. Determined to neutralize the risk, James had already arranged a clandestine meeting with a hitman. He reviewed the details meticulously. The hitman was to meet him at a secluded location later that evening. There would be no trace, no evidence, just silence. James's internal monologue was simple and harsh: I must protect my legacy, no matter the cost. His cold resolve was in stark contrast to the warm smiles he greeted Danielle with each morning. That afternoon, while Danielle went out to meet a friend for lunch, her day filled with innocent chatter and hope, James retreated into his private world. In his office, his mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. On one side was the fear of exposure, on the other, a chilling ambition to hold on to power at any cost. He spent long minutes staring out at the city, his mind replaying the planned meeting, the hitman's words, and the inevitable silence that would follow if the threat was eliminated. Yet, even as the plan solidified, hints of regret occasionally flickered in his eyes. A memory of Danielle's gentle laughter would surface and, for an instant, his conscience would stir. But those moments were fleeting. His heart hardened, and he dismissed the thought. The stakes were too high. By dusk, James slipped into his car, a practiced calm masking the turmoil within. The city lights blurred as he drove to the predetermined meeting point, a dark, quiet parking garage. There, in the gloom, every sound was amplified: the echo of his footsteps on cold concrete, the hum of distant traffic, and the relentless beat of his own anxious heart. He checked his watch, knowing that each minute brought him closer to a moment of irreversible decision. Later that evening, as night blanketed the city, James arrived at the secluded meeting point. The parking garage was empty except for the echo of his own footsteps. He checked his phone, another confirmation from the hitman. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain calm. He needed to maintain the illusion: Danielle must never know. For years, he had played the role of the devoted husband, preserving her happiness to protect the prenup that guaranteed his wealth. Now, his double life teetered on the edge of disaster. James's mind raced back to Vanessa. The message she had sent, her refusal to abort the baby, echoed in his thoughts like a warning bell. He had planned meticulously to rid himself of the risk. In a low, steady voice, he repeated to himself, no mistakes. This must be done silently. As he walked deeper into the darkness of the garage, the reality of his plan grew ever more chilling. He pictured the hitman, a shadow in the night, ready to carry out his orders with cold efficiency. In a quiet corner, a discreet figure emerged from the darkness. The hitman, an enigmatic man with a hardened expression, nodded once and signaled that he was prepared. The conversation was brief and clinical. They exchanged a few hushed words, laden with unspoken implications. The hitman confirmed the final details: the location, the time, and the method. Everything was set. James handed over an envelope containing instructions and a large sum of money, the final piece in this dangerous puzzle. Yet, as the hitman turned to leave, something unexpected happened. A flicker of movement caught James's eye, a reflection in a dark puddle near the exit. For a brief moment, he saw another figure, hidden in the shadows, watching him. His pulse skipped a beat. Could it be that someone had discovered his secret? The thought sent a chill down his spine. James's internal alarm surged. This was the risk he had tried so hard to avoid. With his heart pounding louder than before, he dismissed the reflection as nothing more than a trick of the light. But the uneasy feeling remained. As he returned to his car, the sound of distant footsteps lingered in his ears. James drove away quickly, the neon glow of the city merging with the darkness of his thoughts. His mind was now a battlefield of ambition and fear. He had taken a path that left little room for error, and even a hint of exposure could bring everything crashing down. As the car disappeared into the night, James's phone buzzed with a new, unexpected message: I know your secret. The message flashed on his screen, leaving him frozen in horror. Was someone watching? Had his hidden life already been uncovered? As the days passed, the tension in James's world grew unbearable. Every moment was a countdown to exposure. In the midst of his carefully orchestrated chaos, a secret long buried surfaced. James received an anonymous tip hinting at another pregnant mistress, a woman who had vanished without a trace. The revelation struck him hard. This was not the first time he had risked everything for an affair. The envelope of his hidden sins now contained a dark chapter he had forgotten. The anonymous message was simple: she was not your first. James's mind reeled. He recalled a previous encounter with a secretary from years ago, a woman whose name he had tried to erase from memory. Rumors had swirled then, whispers of a scandal that never made headlines. Now, the truth was coming to light. The fact that this first mistress had mysteriously disappeared without explanation was a secret that could shatter his carefully maintained facade. If Danielle ever learned of it, not only would the prenup be triggered, but his entire reputation would be destroyed. Haunted by the possibility of another hidden scandal, James's anxiety deepened. He began rereading old emails and texts, desperately searching for clues that could exonerate him or at least keep this secret buried. Every forgotten conversation and every hidden file was a reminder of how far he had strayed from the life he once controlled. The weight of the past now pressed down on him, and with it came the terrifying thought that karma was ready to collect its due. Meanwhile, Danielle remained blissfully unaware of the additional storm brewing in James's life. In her daily routine, she still carried the quiet strength that had blossomed from her rock bottom. But the anonymous tip reached her indirectly, a whispered rumor in the corridors of her new business empire. Slowly, hints of James's past began to filter through the grapevine. For the first time, she felt a flicker of vindication. If the truth were revealed, it might finally serve as the retribution she deserved. James, however, was losing control. The discovery of this secret not only raised the stakes but also threatened to unravel the illusion of happiness he had so carefully maintained for Danielle. His heart pounded with the realization that his web of lies was far more tangled than he had ever imagined. Every secret now had the potential to ignite a chain reaction that would consume him entirely. On a quiet evening, as James sat alone in his dim office, rereading the anonymous message over and over, his phone rang with an unknown number. The voice on the other end whispered, "Your past is about to catch up." In that frozen moment, James realized that the first major twist had just begun, and nothing would ever be the same. James's life had begun its slow descent into chaos. The revelation of his past affair, once hidden and now clawing its way to the surface, set off a chain reaction of misfortunes. His carefully maintained facade of happiness at home with Danielle was on the brink of collapse, even as he continued to put on a brave face. Every day, the pressure mounted. Every whispered rumor and every mysterious text felt like another nail in the coffin of his carefully constructed world. In his luxurious penthouse, the opulence now served as a stark reminder of all that he had lost. Expensive watches, designer suits, and lavish parties had once been his pride, now they were symbols of his unchecked ambition and mounting arrogance. Vanessa's role in his life had become a curse rather than a blessing. Her refusal to abort her pregnancy, once a manageable risk, had grown into a terrifying liability. The thought of his wife, Danielle, learning the full extent of his betrayal was enough to send shivers down his spine. Desperation drove James to take drastic measures. He knew that if the secret of his past, and the current scandal with Vanessa, were ever fully exposed, Danielle would activate the prenup, and she would receive 65% of his company. The stakes were too high. In a moment of dark resolve, he decided that one of them must disappear. The plan was risky and unthinkable, a discreet, murder-for-hire operation that would silence Vanessa forever and keep his secrets locked away. As he sat in his study, heart pounding, James drafted the final message to a trusted, shadowy contact who specialized in cleaning up inconvenient problems. The message was cold and precise, leaving no room for error. "Make it vanish, no trace left." The words echoed in his mind as he pressed send. Yet, even as he committed to this dangerous course, doubt gnawed at him. A part of him wondered if he was taking a step too far, if the price of his ambition was already too high. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the silent war waging within James's heart. Meanwhile, whispers of his mounting troubles began to seep through the corridors of his company. Business associates, once loyal, now exchanged cautious glances. The once unstoppable CEO was now a man on the edge, his reputation tarnished by secrets he could no longer hide. One rain-soaked evening, as James sat in the silent gloom of his penthouse, his phone buzzed with an urgent call from his contact. The message on the screen read, "It's time." With a trembling hand and a mind full of dread, he answered, unaware that this call would mark the point of no return in his inevitable downfall. James's life was spiraling. With every whispered rumor and every tense glance at his phone, the threat of exposure grew more real. Desperate to rid himself of the risk that Vanessa posed to his carefully maintained facade, James resolved to take matters into his own hands. He believed that if he could silence Vanessa permanently, the dangerous secret of his affair would be contained, and the prenup would never be triggered. That morning, In the quiet of his dim study, James drafted a final message to his contact, a discreet hitman known only as Shadow. His fingers trembled as he typed, "Eliminate her, no trace, no evidence." The words were cold, final. In his mind, this was the only solution to save his billion-dollar empire. The stakes were too high, and failure was not an option. James recalled Vanessa's fierce refusal to abort her pregnancy. That defiant act had stoked his panic. The thought of an unplanned child, one that could expose his betrayal, was like a ticking bomb in his chest. In that moment, he knew that his only chance was to have her vanish completely. The plan was simple in his mind: arrange one meeting, one silent act, and all would be over. He spent the rest of the day preparing his mind for the inevitable. At every corner of his home, reminders of his double life haunted him: a framed photo of him with Vanessa hidden behind a stack of financial reports, a secret drawer in his study containing incriminating texts, and the constant fear in his heart that his carefully constructed illusion might crumble at any moment. As dusk approached, James slipped into his car and drove to a secluded part of the city, a dark, abandoned warehouse district that offered the anonymity he needed. The cold wind whipped past as he parked near a quiet, empty parking garage. Every sound, the distant hum of traffic, the echo of his footsteps on concrete, reminded him that time was running out. In the gloom of the garage, he waited. Minutes ticked by slowly, each one laden with the weight of his impending decision. Then, as if on cue, his phone buzzed with a terse message: "I'm here." The hitman had arrived. James's heart pounded harder. His mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts, fear, determination, and a fleeting doubt that this path was too dark even for him. He stepped out of his car, the cool night air biting at his skin as he approached a shadowed corner. There, emerging from the darkness, was a lean, unassuming man with cold, steady eyes. The hitman's presence was intimidating, a silent promise that the deed would be done without fuss. They exchanged few words. In a low, clipped tone, the hitman confirmed the plan. Vanessa, silenced. "No trace," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. James handed over a sealed envelope containing both the hitman's fee and detailed instructions. In that moment, as he felt his hand shaking and his mind screaming in terror, he tried to convince himself that this was the only way to preserve everything he had built. "For the company. For my future," he murmured under his breath. Yet, as the hitman turned to leave, a flash in the dim light caught James's eye. In a puddle near the exit, a shadow moved, an unfamiliar figure, watching. The sight sent a chill down his spine. Was someone else aware of his plan? His pulse quickened, and he hesitated, realizing that even the smallest mistake could expose him. The hitman vanished into the darkness, leaving James with a foreboding sense that the night's events might not go as planned. As James hurried back to his car with a heavy heart, his phone buzzed with a new message: "I see you." The words burned on his screen, and he froze in terror, realizing that his secret was no longer safe. In the wake of the chilling message, James's plan began to crumble. Uncertainty gnawed at him as he drove back to his penthouse. His mind was in turmoil. Had the hitman truly completed his task? Was Vanessa already gone? Questions swirled like a storm inside him, each one threatening to unravel the carefully constructed facade he maintained at home. Later that evening, James sat in his study, his eyes scanning his secure phone for any sign of Vanessa. Nothing. The silence was deafening. The hitman had vanished into the night, and with him, any guarantee that Vanessa would be permanently silenced. In a desperate bid to confirm the outcome, James tried calling her phone. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. A cold dread settled over him. Had the plan succeeded, or had it failed in a way he could not control? Across town, Vanessa had already taken drastic measures of her own. Rather than waiting for a grim fate, she sensed the danger and decided to disappear on her own terms. In the early hours of the morning, Vanessa packed her belongings, leaving behind cryptic notes that hinted at deeper secrets. She vanished into the city's labyrinth of alleys and hidden corners, determined to forge a new path without James's shadow looming over her. In her mind, she was no victim; she would be free from the man who tried to control her fate. James's anxiety grew with each passing hour. The vanishing of Vanessa was not the clean, silent elimination he had planned; it was chaotic, unpredictable. Now, he was left with only mounting doubts. His phone continued to flash with messages from unknown numbers, each one a reminder that his actions were being watched by forces he could neither predict nor control. At home, Danielle continued her daily routine, blissfully unaware of the chaos behind closed doors. Yet, as the hours ticked by, subtle hints began to surface. A misplaced item, a whispered rumor among the staff, small cracks in the perfect illusion. James tried desperately to maintain his charade of a happy, loving husband, but the pressure was too intense. The delicate balance of deception was shattering, and the truth threatened to spill over at any moment. James spent a sleepless night, haunted by images of Vanessa's mysterious disappearance and the chilling messages he had received. Every sound in the dark seemed to whisper of his inevitable downfall. His mind reeled with regret and terror as he wondered if he had already set into motion events that he could not undo. In the early hours of the morning, as the city slumbered and James sat alone with his racing thoughts, his secure phone lit up with one final, cryptic message: "She is gone, and so are you." The message left him paralyzed with dread, the weight of his mistakes crushing him. While James wrestled with the fallout of his crumbling plan, Danielle's life was beginning to change in unexpected ways. Over the years, she had quietly rebuilt herself into a woman of strength and resilience. Now running a modest but successful business, Danielle had always sensed that something was amiss in her seemingly happy marriage. Strange whispers and fleeting hints had started to creep into her everyday life, a misdirected email here, a suspicious remark there. Though she maintained her gentle smile, a quiet curiosity grew within her. One afternoon, while sorting through old correspondence in her home office, Danielle discovered a series of encrypted messages on James's computer, messages she had never seen before. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she should open them. But curiosity, combined with a simmering sense of betrayal, pushed her to investigate. The messages revealed a shocking secret, a series of orders and coded instructions that hinted at a plan to permanently silence someone. With trembling fingers, Danielle pieced together the clues. The dangerous language and cold precision of the messages pointed to a murder-for-hire plot, one that directly involved her husband. Her heart pounded as she realized the depth of James's deception. Not only had he been unfaithful, but he had also resorted to extreme measures to cover his tracks. The discovery was like a lightning bolt, sudden, devastating, and utterly transformative. Danielle knew that this information could destroy everything James had built. More than that, it would validate the quiet suspicions that had long nagged at her. Determined to confront the truth, Danielle gathered all the evidence and reached out to a trusted friend who was knowledgeable in legal matters. The evidence was clear and damning. With each new piece of the puzzle, Danielle felt both sorrow for the betrayal and a fierce surge of empowerment. She realized that this was her chance to reclaim her dignity and, perhaps, exact the revenge that fate had long promised. As the truth sank in, Danielle's resolve hardened. She planned to confront James, to force him to face the consequences of his actions, and to protect what remained of her future. The revelation was bittersweet, a moment that confirmed her worst fears, but also ignited a spark of righteous determination. She would not allow James's treachery to define her anymore. Late that night, as Danielle sat alone in her quiet study, she drafted a message to a trusted lawyer. The screen glowed softly as she pressed send, a message that would change everything. In that moment, the promise of retribution and the start of a new chapter in her life began to take shape. With the damning evidence now in her hands, Danielle set her plan into motion. She knew that confronting James directly would be risky, so she chose to gather even more proof. Over the next few days, Danielle discreetly recorded conversations, collected emails, and spoke with employees who had sensed something was wrong. Every detail confirmed her suspicions. James had not only been unfaithful but had also orchestrated a dangerous plot to silence Vanessa forever. Meanwhile, James's world continued to crumble. The cryptic messages he had sent to the hitman now took on a sinister clarity. Every time his phone buzzed with another unknown message, his anxiety deepened. The hitman's task was still in motion, but the mysterious disappearance of Vanessa left James confused. Had the hitman done his job, or had Vanessa vanished on her own? The uncertainty gnawed at him. One evening, while trying to salvage a semblance of normality, James received a call from an unknown number. The voice was cold and direct: "The plan is failing." The message was brief, but its implications were devastating. James's heart raced as he realized that his desperate attempt to control the situation was slipping away. His carefully maintained facade was beginning to crack. Desperation and panic replaced his former arrogance. At home, Danielle prepared for the inevitable confrontation. She reached out to her lawyer and scheduled a meeting with the company's board. The evidence she had gathered would be enough to not only expose James's deceit but also to trigger the prenup. The stakes were now clear. If the truth emerged, Danielle would gain control of XCorp and reclaim her future. The idea of such a dramatic turnaround filled her with a quiet, burning determination. As the hours ticked by, Danielle's plan advanced steadily. Every phone call and every whispered rumor in the halls of XCorp now carried the promise of justice. James, caught in a web of his own making, was running out of time. The balance of power was shifting rapidly, and the impending confrontation loomed like a dark storm cloud. On a cold evening, as James sat alone in his study, his face etched with mounting dread, his phone buzzed with a final message: "The truth is coming." The words hung in the air, sealing his fate as the hidden world of deceit began to unravel completely. The final act of the tale brought a reckoning that could not be denied. James's carefully orchestrated empire of lies had crumbled, and the full weight of his betrayal now bore down on him. With the evidence gathered by Danielle and her lawyer in hand, the board of XCorp had been alerted to his misdeeds. In a dramatic emergency meeting, the board moved quickly to strip James of his power. The prenup was activated, and the truth of his treachery was laid bare for all to see. James tried desperately to salvage what little remained of his legacy, but every attempt was met with cold rebuke. Vanessa's disappearance, once a carefully planned move to silence his secret, now loomed as a mystery with her own dark twists. It turned out that Vanessa had vanished on her own accord, escaping the toxic trap of James's world and beginning a new life free from manipulation. In her absence, the evidence of James's actions became irrefutable. Locked away in a courtroom showdown, James's fate was sealed. His once mighty empire was crumbling under the relentless force of retribution. As Danielle took the stand, her voice was calm yet resolute. "You tried to bury the truth," she declared, "but now it has come to light." The room was silent as the board handed down its verdict: James would be ousted from XCorp and left to face legal repercussions for fraud and deceit. In the midst of the chaos, Danielle's triumph shone brightly. The woman once cast aside was now the guardian of her own future, and with her son Marcus at her side, a brilliant tech CEO, the promise of a new era was undeniable. The once ruined company was now in her control, and every act of betrayal by James was repaid with a sweet taste of justice. James, now isolated and broken, found himself facing the consequences of his ruthless ambition. His desperate schemes had backfired, and the powerful forces of karma had reclaimed what was rightfully Danielle's. The future he had tried so hard to deny was now lost, and his downfall was complete. And that, my friends, is what we call karma at its finest. Do you think James deserved this ending, or should Danielle have been more forgiving? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories by Lane, because trust me, you won't see the next twist coming.